My name is Marissa, and at 32, I thought my 7 years of building our startup into a tech powerhouse meant something. When the acquisition news broke, I watched my boss Stephanie inherit both the promotion I deserved and a $50 million budget, with a smile that never reached her eyes. The day she fired me saying those words I will never forget, something told me she had missed a critical detail. I never imagined how quickly the tables would turn. Let me know where you are watching from, and make sure to hit like and subscribe if you want to see what happens when corporate power meets hidden contract clauses that change everything. I joined TechVision as their 5th employee when we were nothing but a scrappy startup operating out of Rachel's garage. Rachel Adams, our brilliant founder and CEO, took a chance on me despite my limited experience. What I lacked in years I made up for with passion and a knack for understanding what users really needed. The early days were magical. We worked 16-hour days fueled by cheap pizza and expensive dreams, all of us believing in Rachel's vision for enterprise software that would revolutionize supply chain management. Those first 2 years, we built everything from scratch. Our product, Chainlink, started as a simple inventory tracking tool, but evolved into a comprehensive enterprise solution that caught the attention of several major retailers. I led the product development team working directly with Rachel to translate her vision into actionable features. Our company culture was what kept us all going through the hard times. Rachel fostered an environment where collaboration trumped competition, where innovation was rewarded, and where everyone felt their contributions mattered. We celebrated every small win together, from our first paying customer to our millionth dollar in revenue. By year 3, we had grown to 30 employees and moved into real offices. That was when Marcus Johnson joined as our CTO. Marcus was a technical genius, with experience at several successful startups. He immediately recognized my contributions and became a strong ally. Unlike many tech leaders, Marcus valued my non-technical perspective on product decisions. Marissa sees what users need before they know they need it, he once told the team during a product review. That intuition is worth more than 1,000 lines of code. Patricia Chen joined as HR director around the same time. Professional, fair, and genuinely invested in employee well-being, Patricia created systems that preserved our culture, even as we scaled. She implemented our first formal review process, and I consistently received top marks for leadership and innovation. My team grew to include some incredible talent. Alicia Ramirez, a brilliant UX designer who could transform complex workflows into intuitive interfaces. Nathan Park, a data analyst who could extract meaningful insights from customer behavior. Jeremy Foster, a junior product manager I mentored, who showed remarkable promise. They relied on my leadership, and together we created features that became industry standards. Our flagship product, Chainlink Enterprise, was largely my creation. While Rachel provided the initial concept, and Marcus ensured the technical foundation was solid, I was the one who shaped it into something businesses actually wanted to use. I spent countless hours interviewing potential customers, understanding their pain points, and translating those needs into features. One particular challenge stands out in my memory. We were trying to land Meridian Retail, a massive potential client that would double our revenue overnight. Their procurement officer was skeptical about our ability to handle their scale. I personally redesigned our entire inventory forecasting module over a weekend, incorporating machine learning elements that Marcus had been experimenting with. When we demonstrated the new capability, Meridian signed a 3-year contract on the spot. Rachel took me out to dinner that night and hinted that she saw me in an executive role within a few years. "You have the rare ability to connect technology to real business outcomes, Marissa," she told me. "That's the mark of a future executive leader." Things changed somewhat when Stephanie Baker joined as vice president of product strategy 2 years ago. Rachel brought her in from a larger competitor, impressed by her corporate background and connections. From day one, there was tension between us. Where I focused on user needs and product quality, Stephanie prioritized metrics that looked good in board presentations. I tried to establish a productive relationship with Stephanie, who became my direct supervisor, but I quickly noticed a pattern. She would request my input on strategic initiatives, incorporate my ideas into presentations, but credit would somehow become diluted by the time it reached senior leadership. In meetings, she had a habit of restating my suggestions as if they were her own original thoughts. As I was thinking last night, she would say before articulating an idea I had emailed her days earlier. When I created a new pricing structure that increased our average contract value by 30%, Stephanie presented it to the board without mentioning my contribution. Rachel, who knew the truth, made a point of acknowledging me, which only seemed to increase Stephanie's resentment. Despite these frustrations, I remained dedicated to TechVision. We were growing rapidly, hitting 80 million in annual recurring revenue and expanding to over 200 employees. My salary had quadrupled since I started, and my equity stake was becoming quite valuable. More importantly, I believed in what we were building and the difference it made for our customers. The first whispers about a potential acquisition started about 8 months ago. I overheard Marcus and Rachel in intense conversation about valuation models. Then came the mysterious visitors in suits touring our office while employees were instructed to be especially focused on their work. Rachel assured us everything was business as usual, but the energy had shifted. Senior leaders started having closed-door meetings. Stephanie began working directly with Rachel more frequently, often emerging from conference rooms with self-satisfied smiles. Meanwhile, I was assigned to document all our product processes and create comprehensive transition guides, supposedly for new team members we would be hiring. The rumors intensified. Some said Google was acquiring us. Others heard it was Oracle or Microsoft. A few worried we were being purchased by a private equity firm that would strip the company for parts. Through it all, I kept my team focused on our product roadmap, trying to maintain normalcy, even as uncertainty swirled around us. I should have paid more attention to the warning signs. The way Stephanie began gathering detailed information about my work processes, how she started introducing herself to my key clients, the subtle repositioning of my role in company materials. But I trusted Rachel and believed my contributions to TechVision's success would be recognized and rewarded regardless of what changes were coming. How wrong I was. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Rachel called an all-hands meeting in our largest conference room, with additional employees joining via video. Her face was a mixture of excitement and wistfulness as she shared the news that had been swirling through the rumor mill for months. I am thrilled to announce that TechVision has entered into an agreement to be acquired by Quantum Industries for $500 million, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. The room erupted in cheers and applause. For many early employees like me, this meant our equity stakes would translate into life-changing amounts of money. Even newer team members with smaller stakes were celebrating the validation that came with such a prestigious acquisition. Quantum Industries was a Fortune 500 technology conglomerate known for acquiring innovative companies and scaling them globally. Champagne appeared from somewhere, and the rest of the day became an impromptu celebration. People hugged, made tentative plans for their newfound wealth, and speculated about what working for Quantum might be like. I found myself surrounded by well-wishers, many acknowledging my critical role in building the product that had made us acquisition-worthy. "We would never be here without you," Marissa Jeremy told me, raising his plastic champagne flute in a toast. "Chainlink is your baby as much as Rachel's." Amidst the celebration, I noticed Stephanie in deep conversation with 3 executives from Quantum who had joined for the announcement. She caught me watching and gave me a smile that even in that moment of triumph felt somehow predatory. The second bombshell dropped 2 days later. Rachel called another meeting, this time with a more somber tone. She announced that as part of the acquisition agreement, she would be stepping down as CEO after a 3-month transition period. The news sent shockwaves through the company. Rachel had been the heart and soul of TechVision, our visionary leader who had created not just a product but a culture that people loved. "This was a difficult decision," Rachel explained, her voice catching slightly. "But after 7 intense years building this company, I am ready for a new chapter. I believe Quantum has the resources and expertise to take what we've built to the next level." I caught her eye across the room and she gave me a reassuring nod. We had a one-on-one meeting scheduled for the following day, and I assumed she would share more details then about what this meant for my role. I spent that night updating my resume just in case, but felt reasonably confident that my position was secure given my intimate knowledge of the product and strong relationships with key customers. Rachel canceled our meeting the next morning. Her assistant said something had come up with the Quantum transition team. Instead, I received a company-wide email detailing the restructuring plan. Most teams would remain intact, reporting to their current managers, who would now report to Quantum executives. The exception was our product division, which would be completely reorganized. To my shock, Stephanie was named as the new Senior Vice President of Product, a significant promotion that would give her control over not just our current offerings, but future innovation direction as well. My name was noticeably absent from the leadership chart. Instead, my role was vaguely defined as product advisor during the transition period. I immediately emailed Rachel requesting a meeting, but received an auto response saying she was unavailable for the next week due to acquisition integration activities. My next step was to approach Patricia in HR, who seemed uncomfortable with my questions. "These decisions came from the highest levels at Quantum," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I am sure they recognize your value, Marissa, but they are bringing their own perspective on organizational structure." Over the next 2 weeks, Stephanie's behavior changed dramatically. She had always been somewhat political, but now she became openly dismissive of my input in meetings. She scheduled important product discussions when I had immovable client commitments. She reassigned my direct reports to new managers, breaking up the team I had carefully built. The most significant announcement came 3 weeks after the acquisition news. Quantum's board had approved a $50 million budget for innovation initiatives under Stephanie's leadership. This was an enormous sum for a company our size, representing a major vote of confidence in her vision. The budget would fund new development, strategic hires, and potential bolt-on acquisitions to enhance our product capabilities. I tried to maintain a positive attitude, focusing on documenting everything I knew about our products and customers to ensure a smooth transition, but it became increasingly clear that I was being sidelined. My access to certain systems was restricted for security during the transition. My input was no longer solicited for product roadmap discussions. My name was removed from the client communication protocol. Every day brought a new slight. I was moved from my office near the product team to a small desk in a corner of the marketing department. My regular meetings with key clients were reassigned to Stephanie or her new direct reports. The team-building events I had organized were canceled and replaced with new initiatives bearing Stephanie's brand. I tried once more to speak directly with Stephanie about my role going forward. She agreed to a 15-minute meeting that she spent mostly checking her phone. "Marissa, you need to understand that Quantum has different expectations for product leadership," she said dismissively. "Your approach was fine for a startup, but we are moving into enterprise scale now. Just focus on completing the transition documentation." Later that day, I discovered my system permissions had been further restricted. I could no longer access the product development database I had helped build. When I emailed IT support, I received a curt response stating that the request had come directly from Stephanie's office. The final insult came when I accidentally received a calendar invitation for a meeting titled Department Restructuring Final Phase. The invitation was quickly recalled, but not before I saw that it included every member of the product team except me. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. the following morning. I spent that night updating my resume and reaching out to industry contacts. Something told me I needed to be prepared for the worst. I arrived at the office early the next morning, determined to face whatever was coming with dignity. At precisely 9 a.m., as the department restructuring meeting was beginning without me, I received a terse email from Stephanie's assistant, summoning me to a meeting in Conference Room C at 9:30. The small conference room near the HR department was already occupied when I arrived. Stephanie sat at the head of the table, flanked by Patricia from HR, and a man in a suit I recognized as one of Quantum's legal representatives. Stephanie didn't stand when I entered, nor did she invite me to sit. Her face wore an expression of cold satisfaction that made my stomach tighten. "Marissa, as part of the ongoing integration with Quantum Industries, we are making final adjustments to our organizational structure," she began in a practiced tone. "After careful review of our needs going forward, we have determined that your position is redundant under the new structure." The words hit me like a physical blow. Redundant. After 7 years of pouring my heart and soul into building this company, I was suddenly unnecessary. "I do not understand." I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the shock. "I designed most of the core functionality in our flagship product. I maintain relationships with our top 20 clients. My institutional knowledge would seem valuable during a transition." Stephanie's professional mask slipped, revealing the contempt beneath. "Your methods are outdated. Your documentation is substandard, and quite frankly, your attitude, since the acquisition, has been noticed. Quantum requires team players who embrace change, not cling to how things used to be." I looked to Patricia, hoping for some support, or at least a more professional handling of the situation. She wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on the termination paperwork in front of her. This is effective immediately. Stephanie continued now, openly smirking. You will be provided with 2 weeks severance, which is generous considering the circumstances. IT has already deactivated your accounts. The quantum lawyer slid a document across the table. This is a standard separation agreement. It includes a non-disparagement clause and reaffirms your existing confidentiality obligations. I left the document untouched. May I ask what prompted this decision now, 3 weeks into the transition? Stephanie's smile widened. Performance concerns, as I mentioned, and the realization that your skills do not align with our future direction. She stood abruptly. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal items. Pack your desk, you are worthless to this company now. The deliberate cruelty of her final statement stunned me into silence. This went beyond a business decision. This was personal. A security guard I had never seen before, obviously hired by Quantum, waited outside the conference room. He followed me to my desk in the corner of the marketing department, standing uncomfortably close as I mechanically placed my few remaining personal items into a cardboard box, a framed photo of our original team. A mug given to me by Nathan when we launched version 2.0. A small cactus from Alicia that had somehow survived years of neglect. The worst part was walking through the office with the security guard trailing behind me. Colleagues I had worked with for years suddenly became intensely interested in their computer screens, avoiding eye contact. I caught glimpses of my former team members returning from the restructuring meeting looking confused and concerned. Jeremy started to approach but was intercepted by one of Stephanie's new managers. Only Amanda from accounting had the courage to stop me, quickly pressing her business card into my hand with personal contact information scribbled on the back. "This is not right," she whispered. "Call me." The security guard maintained his silent presence as I walked to my car, carrying 7 years of my professional life in a small cardboard box. He watched as I placed it in the trunk, then turned and walked away without a word, his job complete. The drive home passed in a blur. Shock had given way to a mixture of emotions so intense I could barely focus on the road. Anger at Stephanie's obvious satisfaction in my dismissal. Betrayal that Rachel had allowed this to happen. Hurt that my colleagues had not stood up for me. Fear about what this meant for my career and finances. And underneath it all, a creeping doubt. Had I really become redundant? Was my approach truly outdated? My apartment felt especially empty when I arrived. I placed the sad little box of office belongings on my kitchen counter and stood staring at it, unsure what to do next. The silence was broken by my phone buzzing with notifications. Word had spread quickly. A text from Alicia just heard. In shock. Can we talk when things settle? An email from Marcus. This is unconscionable. I am in strategy meetings all day, but will call tonight. A LinkedIn message from a competitor who had tried to recruit me last year. Heard the news. Our offer still stands if you are interested. Most surprising was a voicemail from Rachel's personal cell phone. Marissa, I just found out what happened. I have been tied up in transition meetings in New York. This was not the plan. Please call me when you can. But mixed with these supportive messages was an all-staff email from Stephanie, announcing my departure in coldly professional terms, thanking me for my contributions, and introducing my replacement, a former colleague of hers from her previous company. The email concluded by instructing all teams to direct product-related questions to the new leadership team, effectively erasing my role immediately. I turned off my phone, unable to deal with the conflicting messages. The apartment that had seemed so empty now felt confining. I needed air. Grabbing my keys, I headed for the door, only to have my foot kick something that had been slipped under it. An envelope containing a handwritten note from my neighbor, an elderly woman who had noticed the security guard escort me home midday and was concerned. Her simple kindness broke something inside me, and I finally allowed myself to cry. Hours later, emotionally exhausted, I found myself methodically cleaning out my work bag. At the bottom, forgotten for months, was an old flash drive labeled Emergency Backup Tech Vision 2020. I vaguely remembered creating it during a system migration, storing copies of key contracts and documentation as a precaution. It seemed like a relic from another life now, but something compelled me to plug it into my laptop. Little did I know that this small drive contained information that would completely change the power dynamic between me and Stephanie. The flash drive contained hundreds of documents organized with the meticulous attention to detail that Stephanie had claimed was lacking in my work. financial projections, product specifications, client contracts, and internal policies. I scrolled through them without much interest, the pain of my dismissal still too raw to engage with these reminders of my former life. But one folder caught my attention: founding team agreements. Inside were copies of the specialized contracts Rachel had created for the first 10 employees, including mine. I remembered signing the documents, but had paid little attention to the legal details, trusting Rachel completely in those early startup days. I opened my contract and began reading more out of nostalgia than purpose. The standard confidentiality provisions, intellectual property assignments, and equity vesting schedule were all as I recalled. But, as I continued scrolling, I discovered a section I had completely forgotten about, titled Creator Rights and Product Continuity. The language was dense with legal terminology, but the essence became clear as I read it multiple times with increasing astonishment. As the primary architect of Chainlink Enterprise, I retained special rights related to the product I had helped create. Any major modifications, updates, or extensions to core functionality required either my direct involvement or explicit written approval. My intellectual contribution was recognized as integral to the product, with specific modules listed by name. The most stunning provision stated, in the event of employment termination, creator maintains approval rights for a period of 5 years, following separation exercisable, as a consultant compensated at triple their final base salary rate with a minimum engagement of 20 hours per week. I sat back, my mind racing. Could this possibly be enforceable, especially after an acquisition? I vaguely remembered Rachel explaining that she had included unusual protections for early employees, inspired by similar arrangements she had seen at gaming and entertainment companies where creative talent retained rights to their creations. This protects both you and the company, she had said. It ensures continuity for the product while recognizing your unique contributions. I had thought little of it at the time, focused on building the product rather than legal technicalities. Now those forgotten provisions might be my lifeline. I needed expert advice. I called Danielle Morgan, a law school friend who had gone on to specialize in technology intellectual property law. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring. Marissa, is everything okay? I saw a LinkedIn update about TechVision's acquisition. I need your professional opinion on something, I said, explaining my situation and the contract provisions I had discovered. There was a long pause after I finished speaking. Then Danielle said, email me the contract right now. Do not speak to anyone else about this until we talk again. I sent the documents immediately. While waiting for her assessment, I began researching Quantum Industries' post-acquisition integration patterns. They had a history of aggressive product consolidation, often replacing acquired technology with their own solutions within 18 months. This likely explained their willingness to allocate $50 million to Stephanie for innovation, which probably meant rebuilding Chainlink to eliminate dependencies on the original architecture. Dependencies that, according to my contract, required my approval to modify. Danielle called back an hour later, her tone reflecting professional excitement. This is one of the most interesting creator protection clauses I have seen in a commercial software context, she said. Rachel must have had excellent counsel. To answer your main question, yes, this appears enforceable even post-acquisition. Quantum would have assumed all contractual obligations of TechVision, including this one. So what does this mean practically? I asked. It means they cannot legally modify the core product architecture you developed without your approval or involvement as a paid consultant. Based on the modules listed in the appendix, this covers approximately 70% of the existing product functionality. Any attempt to refactor or replace these components without satisfying the terms would constitute intellectual property infringement. The implications were staggering. Stephanie's plans to reinvent the product with her $50 million budget would hit a legal wall if she tried to modify any of the core functionality I had designed. And from my knowledge of the system architecture, it would be nearly impossible to build around these components without essentially creating an entirely new product. What should I do now? I asked. Nothing, Danielle advised. Let them discover the problem on their own. If they have competent legal counsel reviewing their integration plans, they will identify this issue eventually. If not, they will hit the wall when they try to implement changes. Either way, you are in a much stronger position if they come to you, rather than you approaching them. I thanked Danielle and promised to keep her updated. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with new messages. Former colleagues reporting strange system behavior in the product. A client asking why their customization request had been delayed. Jeremy writing cryptically that things are falling apart here and asking if we could talk securely. It seemed the consequences of my abrupt removal were already beginning to manifest. The complex systems I had built over 7 years were not easily handed off via hasty transition documents. The institutional knowledge I carried could not be readily transferred to Stephanie's new team members. Part of me felt vindicated by these developments, but another part, the product manager who had poured years into creating Chainlink, felt genuine concern for the customers who depended on our software. They had not asked to be caught in the middle of a corporate power struggle. I went to bed that night with mixed emotions. The humiliation of being escorted out by security still stung deeply. But for the first time since hearing Stephanie's cruel dismissal, I felt a sense of control returning. I had built something valuable enough that it could not simply be taken away and replaced. My contributions were literally irreplaceable, embedded in the architecture of the product itself. As I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I did not recognize. "This is Stephanie. We need to talk tomorrow. Urgent product issues to discuss." I smiled in the darkness and left the message unanswered. I woke the next morning to 27 new messages. Former team members, clients, and even 2 board members had tried to reach me overnight. The common theme quickly became clear: Chainlink was experiencing critical failures across multiple modules, and no one knew how to fix them. Jeremy had sent the most detailed account. Attempted system update last night. Failed catastrophically. Core authentication module, rejecting new integration hooks. Customer data pipelines frozen. New team cannot understand dependency maps. Stephanie blaming poor documentation, but everyone knows this is about losing you. I resisted the urge to jump in with solutions. Following Danielle's advice, I responded neutrally to my former colleagues, expressing concern, but explaining that, as I was no longer employed by TechVision, I could not assist without proper authorization. Around 10 a.m. industry news sites began reporting problems with TechVision's flagship product. One headline read, "Post-acquisition integration challenges. TechVision customers report widespread system outages." Another speculated Quantum's newest acquisition, already showing cracks as key product fails. By noon, Stephanie had called 3 more times and left increasingly desperate voicemails. "Marissa, we have a situation that requires historical context. Call me back immediately. This is urgent. Several Tier 1 clients are experiencing issues that may relate to legacy code structures you implemented." The third message abandoned all pretense. "The authentication module is completely locked up, and the new team cannot access the underlying architecture. Whatever documentation trap you left, this is highly unprofessional. Call me now." I forwarded the messages to Danielle, who responded quickly. "Perfect. Let her stew a bit longer. Do not engage without formal terms." Around 2 p.m., an email arrived from Patricia in HR with the subject line, "Consulting Opportunity." The message was carefully worded, describing an urgent need for specialized technical expertise related to legacy systems and inquiring about my potential availability for a short-term consulting engagement at your standard market rate. I replied with professional courtesy, stating that I would consider a consulting arrangement under appropriate terms and requested a formal proposal, including scope duration and compensation details. I also noted that my standard consulting rate was triple my former salary, with a minimum commitment of 20 hours per week for at least 3 months. Patricia's response came within minutes, saying they would prepare the requested details right away. The desperation was palpable, even in her carefully crafted corporate language. By late afternoon, the situation had apparently escalated to crisis level. Alicia texted that Stephanie had been called into an emergency board meeting. Nathan reported that the development team had been working non-stop for 36 hours without progress. A former colleague now at Quantum shared that their CTO was personally investigating the integration failure. I maintained my silence, waiting for the formal terms as requested. Instead, I received another call from Stephanie around 7 p.m. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Marissa, thank goodness. We have a situation that requires immediate attention," she said, her voice strained, but attempting to sound casual. "So I have heard. I received an email about potential consulting work." Yes, we can work all that out," she said dismissively. "But first I need you to talk our team through the authentication module architecture. We have major clients offline and cannot wait for paperwork. I understand the urgency, I replied calmly. However, as I am no longer an employee, I cannot provide professional services without a formal agreement in place. I will need those terms we discussed before I can assist. This is ridiculous, Stephanie snapped, her facade cracking. You know exactly what is happening here. Did you deliberately sabotage the system before leaving? I did nothing of the sort, I responded truthfully. I simply built sophisticated systems over 7 years that require deep understanding to maintain and modify. Understanding that left when I was escorted out by security after being told I was worthless to the company. The line went silent for a moment before Stephanie tried a different approach. Look, I may have been harsh during your exit. It was a stressful time with the acquisition. Let me make it up to you. What if we bring you back as a contractor, say at double your former rate? As I mentioned to Patricia, my standard consulting rate is triple my former salary with a minimum commitment. Those terms are actually specified in my original employment contract under the Creator Rights Clause. I assume the legal team has brought this to your attention by now. Another long silence then. What Creator Rights Clause? Her genuine confusion confirmed my suspicion. In the rush to fire me and install her own team, Stephanie had not done proper due diligence on my employment terms. The acquisition team had likely reviewed standard contracts, but missed the special provisions for founding team members. Perhaps you should consult with legal, I suggested. In the meantime, I am open to receiving a formal consulting proposal that complies with my original contract terms. Stephanie hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, I received a calendar invitation for a 9 a.m. meeting the next day with Stephanie, Patricia, and Amanda Rollins, whom I knew to be a Quantum board member overseeing the acquisition integration. As the evening progressed, the stream of messages from former colleagues continued. The system issues were worsening as inexperienced team members attempted desperate fixes that only created new problems. Clients were threatening to invoke penalty clauses in their contracts. The company's stock had dropped 4% on news of the product issues. Just before midnight, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Stephanie standing in the hallway looking disheveled and anxious, a far cry from the polished executive who had fired me so coldly days earlier. For a moment, I considered ignoring her, but curiosity won out. I opened the door but did not invite her in. It is rather late for a business call. Stephanie's composed mask had completely slipped. Her hair was messy, her eyes bloodshot, and she clutched a tablet computer with white knuckles. The system is completely locked, she said without preamble. We cannot implement any changes. The legal team just found your contract provisions. The board is asking questions I cannot answer. Please, I need your help right now tonight. I believe we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning, I replied calmly. That seems the appropriate time to discuss professional matters. You do not understand, she said, her voice rising. My job is on the line. The entire acquisition could be at risk. Quantum is questioning my judgment in letting you go. That does sound serious, I acknowledged. And I am happy to help tomorrow once we have appropriate terms in place. Stephanie stared at me, desperation giving way to anger. You planned this somehow. You are enjoying watching everything fall apart. No, Stephanie. I simply built robust systems that create value for our customers. Systems that, as it turns out, cannot be casually discarded, along with the people who created them. I will see you at 9 a.m. I closed the door on her stunned face, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also sadness that it had come to this and genuine concern for the company I had helped build. I did not want TechVision to fail. I wanted it to succeed with proper recognition of what I had contributed. As I prepared for bed, a text came from Amanda Rollins, the board member Miss Reynolds. I look forward to our meeting tomorrow. I believe we have much to discuss about your future relationship with TechVision and Quantum Industries. Rest assured, the board is now fully aware of your critical contributions to the company's success. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. I arrived at TechVision's offices at exactly 8:55 a.m., dressed in my most professional attire. The receptionist who had watched me leave in humiliation days earlier seemed unsure how to greet me. Before she could decide, Amanda Rollins appeared in the lobby. Miss Reynolds, thank you for coming, she said, extending her hand. I am Amanda Rollins, board member overseeing the TechVision integration. She was a tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wielding corporate power. Her handshake was firm, her expression unreadable. We will be using the main boardroom, she continued, leading me past the curious stares of former colleagues. I hope you do not mind, but I have expanded our meeting to include several key stakeholders. The boardroom contained more people than I had anticipated. Stephanie sat stiffly at one end of the table, flanked by Patricia from HR and a man I recognized as Quantum's chief legal officer. 3 additional Quantum executives occupied one side of the table, while Marcus sat on the other, giving me a subtle nod of encouragement. At the head of the table was Charles Blackwell, Quantum's CEO, a surprise addition I had not expected. Amanda directed me to a seat directly opposite Stephanie and took her place beside Charles. The power dynamics in the room were immediately apparent. This was no longer Stephanie's show. Charles opened the meeting without preamble. Miss Reynolds, thank you for joining us during what I understand has been a difficult transition. I have spent the past 24 hours reviewing the situation, and I must say I am troubled by what I have learned. Stephanie shifted uncomfortably in her seat, as Charles continued. It appears that critical decisions were made regarding your employment without full understanding of your contractual relationship with TechVision or your central role in the product architecture. This has created both technical and legal complications that require immediate resolution. The legal officer introduced as Robert Chen spoke next. Miss Reynolds, your original employment contract contains unusual but legally binding provisions regarding product development rights. These provisions transferred to Quantum as part of the acquisition and remain fully enforceable. Stephanie interrupted, her voice tight. I was never informed about these special contract terms. This information was deliberately withheld. Amanda fixed her with a cool stare. Did you review Miss Reynolds' complete personnel file before terminating her employment? I reviewed the standard separation checklist provided by HR, Stephanie defended. But did you personally review her original employment contract? Amanda pressed. That would not be standard procedure for an executive termination, Stephanie replied. Charles cleared his throat. The question, Miss Baker, is simple. Did you or did you not check whether Miss Baker Reynolds had any special contractual provisions before firing a founding team member who built the core product we just paid $500 million to acquire? The blunt question hung in the air. Stephanie's face flushed as she realized her position was untenable. No, I did not personally review the original contract. Charles turned to me. Miss Reynolds, I want to apologize for how this situation has been handled. It is clear that your contributions to TechVision have been substantial, and that your continued involvement is essential to the product's success. It was a surreal moment. Days after being told I was worthless to the company, I was now hearing the CEO of a Fortune 500 corporation acknowledge my value. I maintained my professional composure, though inside I felt a surge of validation. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I appreciate your candor. I have always been committed to Chainlink's success and the value it provides to customers. Amanda took over. Let us discuss practical next steps. The immediate issue is resolving the system failures currently affecting clients. Beyond that, we need to establish a working relationship that honors your contractual rights while supporting Quantum's strategic objectives. For the next hour, we discussed the technical issues plaguing the system. I explained the architecture decisions that made the product resistant to unauthorized modifications, not as deliberate sabotage, but as security features designed to protect customer data and ensure system integrity. The authentication module was designed with specific dependency checks that prevent unauthorized structural changes, I explained. This protects against both external attacks and internal errors that could compromise customer data. The Quantum technical executives asked intelligent questions, quickly grasping the elegance of the design, even as they recognized the challenge it presented to their integration plans. Throughout this exchange, Stephanie remained silent, her earlier confidence completely deflated. As the technical discussion concluded, Robert transitioned to the legal and organizational questions. Based on your contract terms, you are entitled to a consulting role at triple your final salary with minimum engagement of 20 hours weekly for any modifications to core system components. However, we would like to propose an alternative arrangement that might better serve both parties' interests. Amanda slid a document across the table. This is a proposed employment agreement for the position of Chief Product Officer at TechVision, reporting directly to Charles. The compensation package includes salary equity and performance bonuses commensurate with executive leadership. We believe this would provide you the authority and resources to guide product development while aligning with Quantum's strategic vision. I reviewed the document carefully. The proposed compensation was substantial, nearly 4 times my previous salary, plus significant equity in Quantum. The role would give me broad authority over product strategy, including allocation of the innovation budget previously assigned to Stephanie. Charles leaned forward. To be perfectly transparent, Miss Reynolds, we have 3 options. We can engage you as a consultant under your contract terms, which gives you approval rights but limited strategic input. We can offer you this executive position with real authority to shape the product's future. Or we can scrap the current product entirely and rebuild from scratch, which would be costly and risky, but would eliminate the contractual constraints. It was a fair assessment of the situation. While my contract gave me significant protection, Quantum had the resources to take the nuclear option if necessary. The executive offer represented a middle path that recognized my value while preserving their strategic flexibility. What would this mean for the current leadership structure, I asked, glancing at Stephanie. Amanda answered smoothly. There would be organizational adjustments to optimize team effectiveness based on demonstrated capabilities. The diplomatic language did not disguise the implication. Stephanie would be demoted or reassigned. As if reading my thoughts, Charles added, Miss Baker has valuable experience in certain aspects of product marketing that could be utilized in appropriate roles. I considered the offer carefully. The consulting option would provide good income with limited responsibility. The executive role offered greater compensation, but also greater challenges in navigating the complex politics of a post-acquisition environment. I would like to propose a modification, I said finally. I will accept the Chief Product Officer role, but I want to retain my contractual approval rights for the core architecture as an additional protection separate from my employment status. Robert frowned. That creates a potential conflict of interest. Not if we align incentives properly, I countered. My goal is to ensure the product's integrity while enabling innovation. I suggest adding specific performance metrics tied to successful integration with Quantum's ecosystem. This protects both my architectural vision and your strategic objectives. A thoughtful silence followed as the executives considered my proposal. Finally, Charles nodded. A reasonable compromise. Robert, please modify the agreement accordingly. Stephanie spoke for the first time in over an hour. This is rewarding insubordination. She deliberately withheld information during the transition. Charles turned to her with a cold stare. Miss Baker, the board has reviewed emails, system logs, and interview statements from multiple team members. Miss Reynolds provided comprehensive documentation that your team failed to utilize properly. The only person who withheld critical information was you when you failed to disclose to this board the true nature of your personal conflicts with a key product architect before terminating her employment. Stephanie fell silent, her face pale with the realization that her position was untenable. Amanda concluded the meeting with practical next steps. I would begin immediately as a consultant to address the critical system issues with the formal executive role to commence once legal documents were finalized. A communication would be sent to all employees and key clients, explaining the leadership changes in positive terms. As the meeting adjourned, Charles asked me to stay behind for a private word. When the room had cleared, he spoke candidly. Between us, Marissa Stephanie's decision to fire you nearly derailed a $500 million acquisition. The board is not pleased. Her future with Quantum is limited at best. I never wanted to damage the company, I said honestly. I just wanted my contributions respected. And they will be, he assured me. Talent like yours is what we were acquiring, not just software code. Rachel Adams warned us about losing you, but her concerns were not properly communicated during the transition chaos. This was news to me. Rachel advocated for me. Charles nodded. Quite strongly. She is the one who alerted the board about your contract provisions when she learned of your termination. She felt personally responsible for the breakdown in the process. As I left the boardroom, former colleagues watched with curious expressions, wondering about my unexpected return. Jeremy gave me a discreet thumbs up from his desk. In the elevator, I encountered Stephanie, her earlier confidence replaced by barely contained fury. Congratulations on your political maneuvering, she said bitterly as the doors closed, leaving us alone. I looked at her directly. It was not politics, Stephanie. It was 7 years of building something valuable enough that it could not function without me. Next time you tell someone they are worthless, you might want to check if they actually built the product your company depends on. The elevator reached the lobby before she could respond. As I walked out into the sunshine, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also a renewed sense of purpose, and the weight of responsibility that came with my new role. The road ahead would not be easy, but at least now I would have the authority to protect what I had helped build. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Heard the news. So proud of you. Coffee soon to catch up properly. I smiled and typed back a simple, yes please. The wheel had turned full circle. My first day back at TechVision as Chief Product Officer was surreal. The same desk I had been forced to vacate in humiliation now belonged to me again, but upgraded and moved to the executive suite. Patricia from HR personally delivered my new access cards and system credentials, her earlier discomfort replaced by professional deference. The all-hands meeting is scheduled for 10 a.m., she informed me. Charles thought you might want to address the team directly about the path forward. Standing before the assembled company an hour later, I saw a mixture of emotions on my colleagues' faces, surprise, curiosity, and from my former team members, poorly concealed delight. As you have heard, I am returning to TechVision in a new capacity. I began. The past few weeks have been challenging for everyone. What matters now is not looking backward, but focusing on our shared future. I outlined my vision for evolving Chainlink while maintaining the reliability and security our customers depended on. I emphasized that my door would be open to ideas from every level of the organization, and I promised transparency about our integration with Quantum's broader ecosystem. Some changes will be necessary, I acknowledged, but change can strengthen us when it builds on our foundations rather than attempting to replace them. My gaze briefly met Stephanie's, seated in the back row with a tight smile fixed on her face. Her new title, Director of Product Marketing, represented a significant demotion, though Charles had decided against terminating her employment entirely. A decision I had supported, recognizing that public humiliation served no constructive purpose. The immediate technical crisis was resolved within 3 days of my return. The authentication module issues stemmed from attempts to bypass security protocols that I had built into the system specifically to prevent unauthorized structural changes. Once I provided the proper access methods and architectural documentation, the development team quickly implemented the necessary fixes. Client confidence, shaken by the outages, required more time to rebuild. I personally called our 20 largest customers, explaining the situation in carefully worded terms that acknowledged the problems without assigning blame. Most were understanding, particularly when I detailed the enhanced stability and new features our integration with Quantum would provide. We were concerned when we heard you had left. The CIO of our largest retail client told me frankly. Your understanding of our business needs has always been what set TechVision apart from competitors. Having you back in a leadership role reassures us about the direction post-acquisition. Rebuilding internal relationships presented different challenges. Some colleagues who had avoided me during my departure now acted as if we had always been close. Others who had aligned themselves with Stephanie worried about their standing. I made a point of judging everyone by their current contributions rather than past politics. Jeremy was among the first I promoted, recognizing both his loyalty and his technical capabilities. I never believed what they said about you after you left, he told me, during our first one-on-one meeting. The way they treated you made no sense to anyone who understood what you had built. Alicia and Nathan also thrived under the new structure, finally receiving proper credit for their innovations. Together we formed the core of a product leadership team that combined deep institutional knowledge with fresh perspectives from select Quantum transfers. Stephanie struggled to adapt to her diminished role. In meetings, she would sometimes attempt to reassert her former authority, only to be gently but firmly redirected by Amanda or other executives. Gradually, she began to focus on the marketing aspects of her position, where her corporate polish and presentation skills were genuinely valuable. During one product review session 2 months after my return, she actually contributed a useful perspective on how to position our security features for financial sector clients. I made a point of acknowledging her insight publicly. The surprised look on her face suggested this might have been the first genuine professional recognition she had experienced, rather than power gained through politics. Rachel and I met for coffee, as promised, away from the office, where we could speak freely. I should have warned you about the acquisition dynamics, she admitted. I was so focused on the big picture that I missed what was happening with Stephanie's positioning. You tried to protect us with those contract provisions, I pointed out. They ultimately saved my career. She smiled. Those were actually my lawyer's idea after I described how central you were to the product architecture. I never imagined they would be tested so dramatically. With the immediate crises resolved, I turned my attention to thoughtfully integrating our technology with Quantum's ecosystem. Rather than rushing changes, I established a methodical process for evaluating which components should be preserved, which modified, and which replaced. The $50 million innovation budget now under my direction was allocated to strategic enhancements rather than wholesale replacement. 6 months into my new role, Charles invited me to present our integration progress to Quantum's full board. The metrics spoke for themselves. Customer retention at 98%, system stability improved by 40%, and 3 major new features successfully deployed. Most tellingly, the Chainlink division's revenue had increased 22% since the acquisition, outperforming projections. The board is particularly impressed by how you have managed the cultural integration, Charles told me after the presentation. Acquisitions often fail not because of technology issues, but because key talent leaves or productivity drops during transition. You have achieved the opposite. My personal growth through this journey was perhaps the most unexpected outcome. The betrayal and firing had been painful, but they forced me to recognize my true value in ways that comfortable success never had. I became more strategic about documenting my contributions while remaining collaborative. I grew more confident in asserting my perspectives while staying open to diverse viewpoints. I also learned to balance professional dedication with personal boundaries. I still worked intensely when needed, but I no longer defined my entire worth through my job. I developed new friendships outside the technology bubble and rekindled old ones that had faded during startup life. A year after my dramatic return, TechVision's integration with Quantum was considered a case study in successful acquisition management. The product had maintained its unique strengths while benefiting from Quantum's scale and resources. The team had stabilized with minimal unwanted turnover. And as Chief Product Officer, I had established a reputation as both a technical visionary and an effective executive leader. During our annual planning retreat, I found myself seated next to Stephanie during one dinner. After a year of professional coexistence, the acute tension had faded into something more like mutual acknowledgement of a complex history. "I underestimated you," she said after several minutes of general conversation. "I saw your technical skills but missed your strategic capabilities." It was the closest thing to an apology her pride would allow. I chose to accept it in that spirit. "We all have different strengths," I replied. "Your marketing insights have genuinely improved how we position our security features." She nodded, accepting the professional olive branch for what it was. As I reflect on this journey from betrayal to triumph, I realize the most important lesson was not about contracts or corporate politics. It was about knowing my true worth and standing firm in that knowledge. It was about recognizing that real value cannot be diminished by someone else's failure to see it. For anyone facing similar challenges in their professional life, remember this. Your contributions matter. Your expertise has value. And sometimes the person who tells you that you are worthless is about to discover just how wrong they are. I would love to hear your stories of professional resilience in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated at work, only to prove your true value? Did you ever have to stand your ground against someone who failed to recognize your contributions? Share your experiences. Hit the like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more journeys of professional triumph over adversity. Thank you for joining me on this personal story, and remember that your worth is not determined by others, but by what you know you can contribute.